I'm going to introduce Andrew Barnes, who is the co-founder of 4-Day Week Global. In 2018, Andrew made headlines with an idea he believed would raise productivity in the workplace while contributing to the well-being of his staff at Perpetual Guardian, New Zealand's largest corporate trustee company. In the years since, Andrew has worked with large companies and close to a dozen countries and governments to pilot 4-day workweek programs and implement changes to the way people work. I'm personally very excited to learn more about the results from these pilots. And I also must give a shout out to Andrew, who has just joined us as we were coming on. So I will let you take it away if everything is all set.
Look, 4-Day Week is a journey that we've been on for the last 5 years. And it essentially started when I had an experiment in my own company. And that was basically to see whether I could improve the productivity in my business. Came up with the concept of what we call the 100-80-100 rule, because I wanted to know what would happen if I said to my people, could you do your job better working 4 days rather than 5? But the key thing is obviously we had to be able to deliver the same amount of output, customer service, profitability and productivity. It wasn't just about a whole question of work-life balance. So we came up with this 100-80-100 rule, 100% pay, 80% time, provided we get 100% productivity. Now this got global headlines. We stopped counting when we got over about 14,000 articles, and we got coverage all over the world. And what happened then was that people started to reach out to us and said, how did you do it? And we started to create these pilot programs, which were based around a not-for-profit that my partner Charlotte and I established. And this was where we do a coordinated 6-month trial. We invite companies to join. We put you through training, mentoring, network, and then backed up with a framework of international research that's coordinated out of Boston College with Professor Juliet Shaw. And that's our quant research. We also have qualitative research, which is run by universities such as Cambridge. The latest research is based on 91 companies, 3,500 workers, and it's based on our research programs in the US, Ireland, Australia, Canada, and the UK. Now, what you're seeing here is the benefits that organizations are seeing. Not only are employees, 90% plus of employees saying they like the 4-day week, and in fact, they really don't want to go back to 5-day working, but actually companies are seeing material benefits in productivity. And indeed, if you look at the research in the United Kingdom and in the United States, the revenue in the period of the trial, COVID, I admit, probably has some impact on this, was 35% higher than of a comparable period in the prior year. And indeed, our revenue actually continued to increase throughout the periods of the trial. But it's not just, obviously, about productivity. It's also about the well-being. And what we're seeing is on broadly every single count, whether it's work-life satisfaction, stress, burnout, the time people can spend getting fit and exercising, increased ability to have strong mental health, which is critical in an area where increasingly cognitive ability is part and parcel of what we need. We also found that women had greater opportunities as a consequence of this, because of course what we're doing is we're paying on output, we are not paying on time. And therefore this benefits not just men and women equally, because effectively it also means as we're pushing our men out, giving them the opportunity to spend more time with their families, you know, they can take a greater share of childcare. In our UK research, we actually saw that men spent 22% more time on childcare. We also see that when people take time out of the organization, they're actually involving themselves in low carbon activity. There has been a piece of research in the UK, I'm not sure how strong it is, that suggests that if the UK adopted a 4-day week, it would actually be the equivalent of taking the whole of the British private car fleet off the road every year. If I drill down to the micro levels, and look at a couple of results that came out of the trial, in Ireland, we found that people got an average of 42 extra minutes of sleep every night. Now, that doesn't sound a lot, but obviously it improves performance during the day. But actually, getting more sleep is actually directly linked to life expectancy. So if you give people more time off and they are able to be better rested, actually what that does is also increase their lives. In the United States, we found that people valued the 4-day week so much. They said they'd need an extra 10 to 50% pay to return to a 5-day work week. In the UK trial, 15% of people said, frankly, you couldn't pay us enough money to come back to a 5-day week. In the UK results, we found that 71% of employees had reduced levels of burnout. And by the end of the trial, 39% were less stressed. These are significant numbers. So how do you do it? I would like to say that, frankly, the research that we have done around the world has broadly proved that actually organizations, regardless of sector, are able to operate effectively working 4 days rather than 5. But the way you have to do this is actually to engage your own employees. This is not a process that you can literally go top down, lay the ground rules out, say you must do things this way. What we found in company after company, that the number one message we give to management is to, firstly, don't overthink this. Secondly, empower your people to come up with the best ideas. Because in essence, you're asking them to identify all of those little things that prevent them being as productive as they might be. And often they are very small. They're things about having a quiet hour, not being interrupted. It's reduction of meetings. It's making sure that they have their mobile phones out of reach so that they're not continuously tempted to grab the phone and have a look what's going on. So plan, absolutely. We do suggest that you enter a trial of some form, either with us or with somebody else, but do a trial, a pilot program, because in essence, you will have to find your own way. What works for me in this structure doesn't necessarily work for you. Share the ideas across the organization. We ran lots and lots of sessions where people shared what was working in one department versus another department. And then we got best practice over the time of the trial so that we were able to see what worked when we went finally to implementing it completely. Get some good legal advice. Usually employment legislation doesn't support a flexible working program. In our organization, we don't close, so therefore we have to have rotation of staff. It means there isn't a normal working week. Get some legal advice that will tell you what is capable of being done in your jurisdiction. And then do the research. By having independent qualitative and quantitative research running alongside the pilot programs, what you're able to do is give the objective outcome to both employee management, who will hate the idea in the first instance, your board, your CEO, and ultimately your customers and your shareholders. But the final point here is this will not work unless there is trust. Because when people hear reduction to a 4-day week, what you don't want them to hear is that pay is going to go down and you are going to want me to do more with less. This is about finding a better way. So as I finish up, I would say to all of you that this is the future. We've gone from being one little company at the bottom end of the world trialing a 4-day week in 2018 to what is now a global movement with legislation being presented to reduce the working weeks in countries all over the world, including the United States. Your biggest risk is not implementing a 4-day week. Your biggest risk is your biggest competitor does it first.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Right off the bat, several people in the audience have gotten pretty tactical about the ask here. And one thing I think that is top of mind is this a matter of condensing or actually subtracting? So a lot of people ask, like, is this 32 hours instead of 40, or is it condensing your normal time into 4 days, which obviously leads to follow-up questions about overload. So I can guess at how you're gonna answer this, but I'd love for you to go into that a little more.
No, we don't recommend keeping the working week at, say, 40 hours and trying to cram it into 4 days. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that, in fact, the productivity in those extra hours is not very high at all. We are what we say we are 80% of the time. Now, that means that can equally apply, by the way, to part-time staff as well as full-time staff. So we're looking for organizations to come on a journey to reduce the overall number of hours that their employees work. You don't have to get to 32 in one jump. You can actually do it progressively, but it's certainly not working longer hours on 4 days.
Got it. And earlier in the presentation, when you were talking about sort of the company experience and how they are rating the experience coming out of these trials, who are you speaking about here? Is this the aggregate of companies, including employees and top-level management, or are you seeing different levels of feedback given the role in the organization?
We're actually looking at this in the aggregate. So what we do is we obviously research the views from a corporate perspective separately of the views of the employees. But what you find really top to bottom in organizations, once you've implemented the 4-day week correctly, that actually it benefits everybody, because leaders need time to think and they need time to recharge their batteries, as well as, you know, the employees. So really the benefits of this actually do apply, you know, from the top to the bottom of an organization, regardless of role or responsibility.
Great. And yeah, and that dovetails nicely with some of the conversations we had earlier today about sort of managing for outcomes instead of, you know, managing sort of in a legacy way. And other questions we had coming out of this was that, you know, thinking about leadership and personas and making this shift, are there specific skills traits you're seeing in leadership teams where pilots have been more successful versus not?
Yeah, look, I think the big area is that if you try and be too prescriptive, we've seen people who've been in the pilot programs or have engaged with us to implement a 4-day week, where they've been absolutely prescriptive. You must do this, you must take this time off, you must follow this procedure. That sort of doesn't work. Because really what we're trying to do is to find those barriers to productivity that are different from each individual, you know, from individual to individual. So what we want them to do is find the barrier that's preventing them being productive. And if they're working with colleagues, that, you know, as a team, is stopping them being productive. And that may well vary. So you can't have this dictatorial approach. It has to be far more collegiate. And what we find is that team building scores out of a program like this literally go off the scale if you execute it correctly.
That's great. And in terms of building that trust, that's another theme that has come up a lot today, that in many ways, the future of work, hybrid models, you know, 4-day work weeks are built on real trust within teams, within the wider organization, trust and empowerment. So are there ways that you see companies rolling out successful sort of, you know, foundations for people knowing their colleague is going to get the work done, even though there's that extra day off that week?
Well, I mean, trust, I think, is twofold. One, the organization has to have a strong culture of trust from the top, because otherwise people hear the wrong message when you stand up and say, let's reduce working hours. You know, I'm scared it's going to impact my job. I'm scared it's going to impact my salary. But when we talk about trust in the organization, that is actually across teams. That's actually absolutely critical, because nobody, in my view, goes over the top for a flag or a mission statement. They go over for the person on their left and the person on their right. And so what we do in our organizations is we set the 4-day week goals, the output goals, on a team basis. So you have a personal responsibility. It's not just what I am going to do. But if I waste your time so you can't do your job effectively, what that also means is that we fail as a group. So this is really about people working together. And I have to say, in 5 years, you know, we've only once, and that was right at the start, we had one team that failed where they didn't really get the essence of what we were trying to do. But every other team got it from the get-go. And what we've actually seen is far stronger team cohesion, collaboration, ideas sharing, because actually I need you to succeed in order for me to get the time off that I want.
That's great. And we've had a couple of questions come up in the audience too about companies where it's a 24-hour organization, or companies that feel lean already. Have you found in outcomes and results from these studies any indication where one of the takeaways might be, we need to hire up, we need more people, like we need to spread some of this around? Or are you finding that shifting schedules is still kind of working within the construct of the original team?
Hey, look, there's a bit of both here, especially when you look at, you say, 24-hour organizations like medicine, where what you're trying to do is equally reduce shift length so you get better medical outcomes. And yes, there is some evidence that you will have to recruit a few more people. However, what you're also seeing is things like sick days reduced by 67%. So your cost of temporary staff, bringing in locums in the case of medicine, gets massively reduced. Your ability to fill open positions gets reduced. Mistakes go down. So what you find often is there may, in some instances, be a need to recruit more, but actually your costs overall will remain broadly flat, and that seems to be pretty consistent. With regard to my organization, which I actually think is pretty lean already, we've implemented, you know, the 4-day week 5 years ago. We're twice as productive on a per capita basis now as our nearest competitor. Now, that actually is an interesting indication of working better, and that begets more better working as well. You know, once you've found a way to be more efficient, often you find another idea which enables you to be even more efficient. So we're not seeing any adverse impacts of that. So I think even lean companies can find a better way, because otherwise, let's face it, you're saying you've reached the pinnacle of human achievement in the way in which you're working, you know, in your company today.
Well, that's, I think, a really inspiring note to leave our audience with, and it gives lots of food for thought, I think, for teams that are thinking about implementing new ways of working and 4-day work weeks. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time.
Thank you.